Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Elite Sports Show. I am Austin Bradley, as well as Jordan Ellsworth. I'm sorry, I blanked out on what I was supposed to say there. Anyway, welcome to this week's episode of the Elite Sports Show. It is October 21st, 2025, and we are super happy to be with you. We have a ton of stuff to go over, a ton of stuff to talk about. It was a crazy weekend in college football, some upsets in college football, a big rivalry game coming this weekend. The NBA is back on NBC, and so much more. The World Series is going to start later this week on Friday night. I know you're really excited to talk about that. And for the first time this year, we are back. We have a college basketball top 25 ranking for you guys. And I'll tell you what, I was like a giddy little schoolboy today, sitting writing down all my notes as I went down and made this top 25 out. Made some changes. I made a couple changes that you don't know about. You'll find out, I guess, whenever we get there. That's my bad. But either way, super stoked to be here. Let's just start, man. How's your week?
It's been good so far. Just working, and that's about it. As a educator, this is kind of the grind of the first semester, and kind of we're in a groove now, and so. But Thanksgiving, Christmas will be here before you know it. So
that is no joke. I sat down and I was watching the Duke and UCF exhibition game for a little while tonight, and it just kind of hit me like, good Lord, we're right here at college basketball season, which means we're also right here at Thanksgiving. And when Thanksgiving's over, we're going to be right here at Christmas. And it's just kind of surreal to me a little bit that this year has went by as fast as it has. But I'm super excited to get back on here, talk some sports with you, and let's hop right into it. Michigan in Ann Arbor on Saturday morning knocks off the Washington Huskies 24-7. This game was a shellacking in my by the Michigan Wolverines. Washington scored the first score of the game and did not score again. Michigan kind of looked like that old vintage Jim Harbaugh Michigan that we saw. You made a comment at one point that if Michigan played the way they did Saturday, they could win a national championship. I'll start there, and we'll kind of dive into some quarterback performances in a minute. But I'm going to ask you now, it's been 3 days. 3 days since that game. They're preparing to play Michigan State in East Lansing. They're now number 25 in the country. Do you still stand by that statement when you say that, when you think about that game and the way that they played and carrying that on the remainder of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I do to a certain extent. I mean, it's a microcosm of what their season has and hasn't been, right? If they could play like that every single game from here on out, then yeah, I truly believe that if they were to make the playoff, which there's a couple of question marks there. The 2 losses. We don't know how a lot of the other teams in the other power conferences their seasons are going to end up. So if you end up with a bunch of teams that are at 10-2, does Michigan make it? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But if they can consistently play like this, then yeah, I think they could definitely win a national championship.
Yeah, I think that's what's so crazy about the teams that, I feel like most of the time, and maybe this is just me, is it just me, or are there less teams this year that are undefeated at this point? Is that just me? Because a lot of teams have 1 loss, a lot of teams have 2 losses. There's going to be a team get in the playoff in December over a team that beat them. I rather, and I think it's going to probably be a Big Ten team. I think that 4th Big Ten team will either be will probably be Michigan. Well, if there is a 4th Big Ten team get in, I think it will be Michigan. and I think they would get in over USC with a win at Ohio State. The SEC, maybe the loser of MIZZOU and Vandy gets in, depending on how they do the remainder of the season. But my thought process is like, I don't know. To me, it just feels like there's not nearly as many undefeated teams. It seems like there should be, 8 or 9, maybe, or not 8 or 9, but maybe 6 or 7 as opposed to just 3 or 4 like there is now.
Well, you've had some conferences that went to 9 conferences games, which makes a difference. We've had all this mix up with the conferences, meaning, Pac-12 kind of merging with Big Ten or parts of it, obviously not the whole thing. Teams getting out of the Big 12 and joining the SEC like we've seen over the last last decade or so. Well, we're going back to when MIZZOU did it, Nebraska going to the Big Ten and whatnot. So I think the landscape of college football has changed drastically, and I think your schedules have changed along with it. So I think the schedules are a lot tougher. The conferences are a lot deeper because of the added teams. So I think we are seeing now where we're not necessarily talking about, a handful of teams that are undefeated, like in the old BCS days where you may get to week 10 and it's literally like all the way up to 6 and 7 are undefeated. And it's like, okay, but who's going to get it? Who are going to be the teams that play for the national championship? And then when they started the playoff, you got 4 teams. We still had a lot of undefeated teams. It's like, okay, well, who gets in over who? And now it's like you get to the end of the season and you got 1 or 2 teams who may be undefeated, and the rest have 1 or 2 losses. And so I think it's a combination of deeper conferences, tougher schedules, more conference games, and lost my train of thought. But yeah, but basically those factors I think contribute to less undefeated teams at this point in the season.
Yeah, I think you're right. I want to look before I speak on this. The SEC has 1 undefeated team. The Big Ten has 2. Now, those 2 teams do not play each other. I think the biggest Big Ten game remaining on the schedule, unless Michigan loses again before they get there, is Michigan and Ohio State. I think Indiana runs the table. I think Michigan goes into that Ohio State game at 9-2. Can they win it when they get there? I think that game as a whole is going to have so much of an impact on what the CFP looks like. Because if you think about it this way, and I know this isn't exactly Michigan and Washington here, if you think about it this way, if Ohio State loses to Michigan, Indiana's the number 1 overall seed. If Ohio State beats Michigan, Michigan's out for sure. A 9-3 team is not making the playoff this season unless something dramatic happens. And then Ohio State would then go to, well, actually, hold on, because that also stops me to think this too. If Ohio State beats Michigan, then I want you to look at it this way. If Ohio State beats Michigan, which I'm going to be honest, I don't think is going to happen. I think Michigan has the mental edge. I think Michigan is going to use these next few weeks to get right and head into that game at 9-2. Bryce, it's at home, okay? But say they do. Say Ohio State ends this 4-game losing streak against Michigan. They'll play Indiana in the Big Ten title game. So the winner of that game, can you imagine that? Indiana versus Ohio State with what would probably basically be an Indiana home game in the Big Ten title with the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff on the line. The only other alternative, well, there is no other alternative because I don't think Texas A&M is going to run the table, and I don't think that I don't think you can give a 1-loss Alabama team the number 1 overall seed against an undefeated Ohio State or Indiana. that beat the other option. I'm going to be honest. I think if Ohio State beats Michigan, Indiana and Ohio State should be 1-2, regardless of that outcome of the Big Ten title game. That's just my opinion. And I know that I kind of chased a little bit of a rabbit there. But we're kind of getting down into the nitty gritty of this college football season where every game matters, every week matters. And we're going to see a lot of fluctuation and change in this CFP picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on how the season ends. I mean, we've seen seasons in the past where a lot of these teams who are either, which we only have a couple who are undefeated, or with one loss, and we have that week or two where a number of the top 10 teams go down, they fall.
Right.
To somebody that they probably shouldn't have lost to. So, I mean, we've seen crazier ends to seasons. So, it'll just kind of depend on how it shakes out. But I'm with you. I mean, what Indiana and Ohio State have done at this point, unless they just somehow lose a couple of games between now and then, I mean, obviously they've both put themselves in the playoff already. And then it's a matter of what their seed is at that point. If we get to the Big Ten championship game and they're both undefeated, I agree with you. I think they're still 1-2. It's whoever wins the game is 1, whoever loses is 2, and then if Alabama stays on their streak, gets to the playoff with 1 loss, I think they're number 3. And then you probably got Oregon if they're still sitting there with 1 loss at number 4. And then, it's kind of like flipping a coin after that on some of these seeds.
Yeah, I will also tell you, and this is just worth noting here because I feel like it is important. Georgia Tech is 7-0, and Haynes King has been phenomenal. So they are a team to watch for as well as we're gonna as we get closer to this college football playoff, the beginning of that, and we get closer to conference title games. I will tell you also, I think maybe it would be worth it to have a show, maybe it's a special episode 1 week and where all we talk about is just college football and college football playoff talk and all of that stuff. But I want to shift gears now to a big time SEC game this weekend. College Game Day is going to be in Nashville for number 15 and number 10 or number 15 Mizzou and number 10 Vanderbilt. This all of a sudden is a big game with massive, massive SEC title implications. The winner of this game, in my opinion, has as good a chance to get to Atlanta as any of the other 1-loss SEC teams do. And also, there's another SEC game that I want to mention briefly in just a moment. Diego Pavia, Bo Pribula, Ahmad Hardy, Nashville, College Game Day. Dude, if you're a Mizzou Tiger fan or a Vanderbilt Commodore fan, what more could you want out of your football season? This atmosphere is going to be electric. This game is going to be on fire. I don't know exactly what time it starts. Dear Lord, I hope it's not a night game. But yeah, I mean, this game is probably the game that I am the most excited for this weekend outside of the battle for Paul Bunyan, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a must-see game this weekend. I think Mizzou, I mean, really either team, but I'll talk about Mizzou because I know a little bit more about them than Vanderbilt. I've seen some highlights of Vanderbilt. Of course, Pavia is a great quarterback, and we know kind of his story and whatnot. But I think Mizzou is in control of their own destiny. The 1 loss they have is to arguably the best team in the nation right now. Since week 1, they've been phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal. And if we're really honest with ourselves, Missouri didn't play well in that game and only lost by 3, and probably are kicking themselves that they didn't win that game. At the same breath, they're relieved this past week that they were able to pull off the win at Auburn. And Auburn has their own problems, but I don't care what you say. You go into Jordan Hare, you're gonna have a ball game on your hands. And Mizzou was lucky to survive that, but I look for them to have a better game on offense. I think this is the third, maybe their fourth SEC game, but they had Alabama, played Auburn, now Vanderbilt. I think they figure something out this week on offense. I don't think you'll see the struggles of Beulah this week like you had in the past weeks. I think they got to figure out something with their pass protection. They got to figure out running the ball with Hardy. But if they can figure out a couple of those things, I think that they can win this game. I think it'll be close, obviously, because Vanderbilt's got an unbelievable offense as well. Mizzou did impress me at times Saturday on defense. I thought there was a couple times that it was a surefire loss, especially in the overtimes, and they were able to get to the quarterback. And so look for that on Saturday. If they're able to get to Pavia consistently on Saturday, then I think that they win the game. But that's going to have to be in combination with improved offense. They've got to get better on offense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for Mizzou, well, first of all, I think Vanderbilt, I think as excited as Mizzou fans are going to be for this game, I think Vanderbilt fans are going to be just as. This is a game where, this can be made a statement game, right? For
Vanderbilt's legit. They're legit.
They are legit. And I'll tell you something too. And this is important, I think, for me to point out here. This is an SEC title eliminator. The loser of this game is out of that picture. The loser of this game is not out of the college football playoff picture.
Yeah, they're not, because they're still going to be put in front of, let's say, a Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, I think a Georgia Tech one-loss team still has a chance to make the playoffs on the back end of it, but with the ACC not being not being a very strong conference, like Georgia Tech doesn't have much room for error. So if Mizzou was to lose this game, for example, and they're able to finish the season with 2 losses, obviously they don't go to a SEC title game, but the selection committee is going to put them above a Georgia Tech one-loss team, in my opinion.
I do want to sit here and say about Georgia Tech, and I know a lot of people are kind of pointing out, and we'll see the last week we'll see. I do believe they play Miami here coming up. I'm going to tell you something. Georgia Tech is the real deal. And I'm not saying that you're saying they're not. I know that you're not. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that because of the conference that they play in not being very strong, they're not getting the credit that they deserve. I think that Haynes King is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, in the entire country. I think he is a threat. He is one of the biggest threats on the ground. It's nothing for him to get 100 yards on the ground. He's athletic. He can throw the ball. I like this Georgia Tech team. I like this Georgia Tech team to do damage once they get to the playoffs. I don't believe it's an if. I believe it's a win. They get to the playoff. I believe they will do damage. They're going to end some. Here's my bold prediction for the college football playoff. Georgia Tech is going to end someone's season that you don't expect.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, and anybody watching this, I'm not saying that Georgia Tech's not any good. I mean, I've been around long enough to know. I mean, Georgia Tech has a rich football tradition, for sure. It's and they're back this year. But I think it's the same argument with the ACC as it was last year. You had basically Clemson and Miami. Outside of that, that was basically it.
And now this year you have
Georgia Tech, Miami. Miami lose?
Miami lost.
They did.
So
lose.
Now it's Georgia Tech. It's really, in my opinion, it's Georgia Tech Louisville, and then maybe Miami and possibly Virginia.
Yeah. I think Miami recovers though. I think they still get in. I think they've kind of hurt themselves a little bit. I still say at the end of the day, it's in my opinion, from the ACC, Georgia Tech, Miami get in. I think outside chance, depending on how they finish the season, Louisville gets in from the ACC, but that's probably it.
Yeah, I think ACC is a two-bid league. I think it's Georgia Tech and one of the other three. It's Miami or Louisville or Virginia. I think
I'd like to see Miami in there. I like Carson Beck, and I think they're a really good team that could win a national championship. It's just the conference they play in. When you take a loss like that, it just kind of makes your path a little less straight, I guess you could say. Makes it more difficult.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We're going to wrap up our football talk with one more game preview. It is Michigan and Michigan State, the greatest football university of all time, against the convicts from East Landfill, getting ready to square off. I wonder how many Michigan football players will be assaulted this year. Everybody remembers a few years ago where there was an awful assault that led to players getting suspended and a few criminal charges that were eventually dropped. I wonder, whenever Michigan beats these guys by 100 points, I wonder how many players get assaulted. I hope it's not many. I hope those players aren't good if they do get assaulted. In all seriousness, I say all that laughing and joking and stuff. Michigan cannot overlook this Michigan State team. And I know you're probably thinking, and people watching this are probably thinking, what do you mean? They're not going to look over Michigan State. Yeah, they would. This Michigan State team is bad. And I'm not even saying that as a pro Michigan guy. I'm saying this Michigan State team is objectively awful. And you can get caught looking ahead in a game like this because you just know you're going to win. You cannot lose this game. You don't even want to play this game close, Jordan. You want to win this game by 3 touchdowns. And yeah, you want to beat the rival as bad as you can every year, but you're trying to build momentum to the real football rival at the end of November. If you come out and you win this game by a field goal because you can't get your crap together on defense, like we saw for the first half of the last game and then basically every game before that, that's just a bad omen, in my opinion. You got to come out and take care of business early and often. And if you're Michigan State, I'm just going to tell you, this might be Jonathan Smith's last weekend as their head coach. And I think Michigan State fans are probably hoping that is the case. Interested to kind of get your thoughts on this game. We'll kind of wrap it up and move on to the next. We got a few more topics to cover. Of course, we got our top 25 to get into, but just kind of your thoughts on this game real quick. And
just a couple, simple things. I think Michigan's got to take care of business. They got to start heading in the direction of being more consistent with their play. They got to build off last week. You can't have a game where you go to East Lansing and, like you said, it's just we've thrown a couple of picks on offense and we can't protect anybody on defense, and we can't get to the quarterback on defense, or we can't, whatever the case may be, and we get down to the fourth quarter and it's 17-14, Michigan State's ahead, or Michigan's only up by 3, and we're scrambling to win the game, and those types of things. I think if Michigan wants to build that resume as a playoff team, they've got to run the table here. They've got to beat everybody they're supposed to beat by as many as they're supposed to beat them, and they've got to set up for that showdown with Ohio State.
Right. I totally agree. I think the spread for this game is like 14 points. I think Michigan needs to cover that, and then maybe even a little more if they can. You know, I like Michigan in this game. I don't think this game will be particularly close. You know,
It shouldn't be. We'll see.
If Michigan takes care of business, anyways, it will not be particularly close. I do want to predict the Mizzou and Vanderbilt game. I know we didn't get to that just a second ago. I'm going to say Mizzou 23-20, or not 23, I'm sorry, 24-21. Maybe not a game-winning field goal, but not a walk-off field goal, but a game-winning field goal. And then they get a key defensive stop.
Yeah, I think we're headed towards another overtime game like they had with Auburn. A cleaner game. Definitely a cleaner game. But I think it's overtime. And I think Mizzou wins it by a touchdown by default, because obviously in overtime you can only go for touchdowns and, 2-point conversions. So I say they win it by, 6 or 8, and it's 30-24.
30-24. Okay, Michigan and Michigan State. I'll make the first prediction. I'm not going to say something stupid. I think Michigan 34-3.
Perfect. I agree with you. 34-3. I think they beat them by 3 touchdowns or more. Like I said, I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's like, 56-3 or 10 or whatever. But I think you're in the ballpark. I think it's probably like 34-3, 34-10, 30-13, somewhere in there.
All right. Let's move on to our college basketball. It is here. Finally. It's finally here. I'm going to take this graphic off the screen because it's covering your face. Emmanuel Sharp is a little bit too big-headed on my graphic there. I'm so excited for this. I've been watching exhibition games all the time. We wanted to kind of talk about our poll a little bit. I know some of this you're seeing for the first time. I want to pull it up real quick. It is going to take up all of the screen. You've got Purdue coming in at 1, followed by Houston. Hang on, let's see if I can't do this. I cannot. I'm sorry. I was hoping maybe I could make it to where we were on the screen.
I wouldn't worry about that. Just talk about the poll.
Anyway, we got Purdue number 1, Houston coming in at number 2, Michigan at number 3, Florida at number 4, UConn comes in at number 5. 6 through 10 is Duke, St. John's, Louisville, Kentucky, and BYU. Arkansas, Illinois, UCLA, Arizona, Texas Tech come in at 11 through 14. 16 through 20 is Iowa State, Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, and Gonzaga. And then 21 through 25, wrapping up the top 25 ranking, is San Diego State, Wisconsin, Michigan State at 23, Kansas, and Oregon at 25. I considered a few other teams. I considered Mizzou. I considered St. Mary's. I considered like a couple of those smaller, mid-major schools. I'm pretty confident kind of in what I have. Obviously, we'll see here in a couple weeks. Of those teams, and I know there's 25 of them, so this is kind of like a big-time question. Who of those teams intrigue you the most? Who do you think maybe is a little overrated or maybe a little underrated on that ranking? And then we're going to talk here at the end of this conversation. We're going to give our final 4 picks and our national championship game prediction like we always do as we kick off the basketball season.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to kind of critique your poll because I didn't really have a time to put one together. Austin knows this better than anybody, but I've basically been watching baseball, and that's about it. That's my favorite sport. I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, but basketball is a very, very, very close second. Um, but I don't know. I mean, you could change this a lot of ways. It's like splitting hairs, though. Got it pulled on my phone so I can kind of look at it and talk at the same time. One team that I think is a little underrated at 10 is BYU. I've seen a little bit of what I've seen on, you know, some polls that I've looked at, some predictions, some TikToks that I've seen social media wise. Um, I think BYU is one of the better teams in the nation, and I think they're going to get a little underlooked. Of course, they play in the Big 12 now. Um, I know you have Purdue at number one. I know you're very high on Purdue. Yeah, I mean, I think they could be number one. If I were going to do my own poll, I'm kind of one of those guys like, well, it's kind of based off what's coming back. I think Florida and Houston are still very good. And so, and this would just be me, and I mean, anybody can disagree, but I probably would have went with the Florida Gators probably number one. I would have kept Houston at two. I like Michigan at three. I would have put Purdue at four. I honestly think that Michigan's on paper, we haven't played yet, is a little better than Purdue. That may not be how it ends up, in the regular season. Purdue may be, they may be way better than Michigan. We don't know. UConn, yeah, I think they have a bounce back year. I think it was just a very difficult transition year for UConn last year, coming off back-to-back national championships, and just kind of got in a rut for most of the season, and kind of came out of it towards the end. Played okay in the tournament, but I think they have a big bounce back year. Duke, they're always going to be ranked high, but you don't know until they start playing.
Hey, Duke beat the brakes off UCF tonight, just so you know.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're going to be very good. They're going to be very good. But we know last year, if they were going to win a national championship, last year was the year. Now, they may turn around and win it this year, But, I think they're still kicking themselves the way last year ended. If they beat Houston, I think they beat Florida. But we'll never know. Louisville, hey, hats off to them. I think they are very good. To come where they just a few years ago being at the bottom of the barrel, and now to be in some people's top 10 is great. Kentucky's always going to be there. Don't sleep on Calipari and the Hogs. I think they're better this year. I don't think they're going to have that kind of lull in the middle of the season like they had last year. When they got into SEC play, it was just a struggle for a long time. I don't think they have that this year. I'll probably skip over a couple teams here. Tennessee, I'm always high on them. I love Rick Barnes. Auburn's got a lot of talent coming back. We'll see the transition there. Bruce Pearl's out. His son's in. And, he was part of the coaching staff, but I'm sorry, when the head honcho leaves, doesn't matter if it's his top assistant, doesn't matter if it's his son, it's going to be different. And so how do they adjust that? How do the players adjust? Iowa State is probably one that people are sleeping on. We know how they played for most of the year last year. Gonzaga, I think, has a bounce back year. Michigan State, you're going to wake up in early March and they're going to be in the top 10, or maybe still down towards the bottom. It's like, what's wrong with Michigan State? And then you turn around 3 weeks later and they're in the Final Four. So, never sleep on Michigan State. And that's just kind of my thoughts for the top 25.
Yeah, I'll kind of give you my thought process through a little bit of it. I think Purdue at number one has the most upside. They bring back Braden Smith. They bring back Fletcher Lawyer. They bring back Trey Kaufman-Wren. They get their big guy, Daniel Jacobson, back. I really like Purdue. I think Purdue is going to win the Big Ten. I think that I'll say something that isn't going to make a ton of sense to people. I think Purdue is best built to win the conference. I think Michigan out of that conference is best built to win a national championship. I'll say that. Florida, they bring in that guard from Princeton that's just a stud. I'm really looking forward, and of course they bring Condon back. UConn with Solo Ball and Danny Hurley, they're going to have a bounce back year. Duke, if I had watched Duke play UCF tonight before I made this ranking, Duke is probably like number 2. Duke looked really, really impressive. Now, I will say this, take exhibitions with a grain of salt. Houston lost to who did Houston? Did Houston basketball lost to maybe Oklahoma State or Ole Miss? Maybe it was. I want to check that real quick, but I know they lost in an exhibition game. Again, guys, take those games with a grain of salt. For whatever reason, I cannot, find that. It was either Ole Miss or Oklahoma State. Illinois is a team that I think is going to be really good. I think they are going to give Michigan and Purdue a run for their money. I think those are going to be great matchups. Of course, you remember Illinois has both of the Evie-Sitch twins. They have Ben Humacris. They have another foreign guard, from overseas. Another team that I liked down at the bottom, they could have been ranked higher. Another Big Ten team. I look at a team like a Wisconsin that brings back John Blackwell and Nolan Winter and those guys. Oregon brings back Jackson Shelstead, TJ Bamba, Nate Biddle. A lot of Big Ten teams that are going to be really good. Donovan Dent from New Mexico transferred to UCLA. I think the Big Ten is once again the premier basketball conference this year. And I think you probably can see that. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. I had 7 Big Ten teams in. And honestly, that we could see more. I think there are some other teams that can make some hay. I think USC can make some hay in the poll. I think that Ohio State could be good. I don't think that some of these teams are national championship contenders, but I think they could be good. Auburn would have been a lot higher had Bruce Pearl not walked out 2 weeks ago. Or 3 or 4, whatever it was. Auburn is probably in my top 10, maybe even my top 5. But you just don't know. I think they still have Pettiford, which was great. I know you and I, as soon as Bruce Pearl retired, I text you, and you and I both were like, Michigan needs to go throw the proverbial NIL book at this guy, at Pettiford, to try to get him into the portal. He didn't go to the portal. Hats off to him. I like a lot of these teams. I don't love, but just a few of them, to tell you the truth. I think that Purdue, Michigan, Houston, Florida, Duke, and St. John's are probably legitimate Final Four contenders. Now, you never know. There could be there could be a Cinderella or something. But I really only think that there are 6 or 7 Final Four contenders. I will say this. I think every one of those Final Four contenders are also a national championship contender. I will stop my rambling and say this. I'm going to predict my Final Four real quick. I'm going to say Purdue, Michigan, Florida, and Duke. No, not Duke. Not Duke. I'm sorry. St. John's.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I hadn't thought about a Final Four prediction per se. So I'm gonna bow out on that one to start, and just kind of leave it at that and see where we're at when we start. When we get into the regular season full swing. I don't know. I like Duke and Michigan. I mean, what the heck? I kind of give you one. I think. I don't think Duke makes the Final Four this year. I just got a feeling about that. I don't have any number one reason why. It doesn't necessarily have to do anything to the roster. I think they're really good. I just think something's going to happen. They're going to get upset somewhere somehow. I do think Michigan gets over the hump and makes it to Final Four this year. I think BYU makes it to Final Four. It's going to be kind of my bold prediction with that. I'm going to go Michigan, BYU. I think Houston gets back, and Purdue. We'll go two Big Ten teams. Houston, and then BYU being the not Cinderella, but I guess bold prediction there.
Yeah, I could see that as well. I'm excited for college basketball season. I would kind of like to do almost similar to like a football, kind of like we talked about, maybe like a football special, a college football special. I'd like to do a special for college basketball where we take, we're coming up on 40 minutes now or 42 minutes now. Maybe we take 45 minutes or an hour to just, break down some of these teams more in depth, watch some film, and kind of come up with a little more, I guess, as educated of guesses as you could come up with. I think that would be good. That would be really good. So let's move on to what we know is going to be your favorite segment of this show, and it should be. It's big time. The World Series starts Friday. It is the Toronto Blue Jays and the Los Angeles Dodgers in the Fall Classic. What a series between the Mariners and the Blue Jays. The Dodgers made the Brewers look silly. Without ranting about salary and stuff like that, I'm going to be honest. You kind of said you've really only been watching baseball. I have not really I've watched 2 baseball games in the last month. I watched Game 5 of the ALDS between the Mariners and the Tigers, and then I watched Game 7 last night between the Mariners and the Blue Jays. Talk to me, Jordan. What to expect from this World Series? And yeah.
I think a lot of what I've seen on social media is, and maybe coming from a lot of Dodger fans, but I think a lot of people feel like the Dodgers are going to win in 4 or 5 games. Just my opinion and my prediction, I don't think that this series is a 4 or 5 game series. I think that this is going to go 6 or 7. I think the way the Dodgers have played, do they have the edge? Sure. But the one thing that got the Brewers in trouble is they could not score. A lot of that had to do with the Dodgers, but a lot of that had to do with the Brewers not being able to capitalize in the big moments. They had base runners all night long, every game. Game 1 was a killer for them. They should have came back and won that game. They didn't. And I think it set the tone for the rest of the series. They scored 1 run in each game. And so, and I say that to say this, the Blue Jays, in my opinion, are totally different. They scored a ton of runs in the series against the Mariners. And the Mariners have good pitching. I don't the way that Glasnow and Snell and Ohtani and and those guys are pitching right now. You know, you probably give them the edge, but the Mariners have a very good pitching staff. I mean, the Blue Jays pulled that one out last night, but look at what they ran out there. And George Kirby and then Brian Wu. I mean, Brian Wu looked electric. And then they were able to get a couple base runners, and then ultimately George Springer hit the home run. I think it's a longer series because, and the Dodgers may win. That's not going to be my prediction because I'm not going to pick the Dodgers. I'm just not going to do it. Would not surprise me if they win, obviously. But I think it goes 6 or 7. And and I'll get to my prediction here in a minute, but I think the Dodgers are in for a very tough series because this Blue Jays lineup is the real deal. Say what you want to. Yeah, the Dodgers have had spurts in this postseason where their offenses look really good, but you're talking about beating the Brewers 2-1 in Game 1. They beat them 5-1 in Game 2, and it was like 3-1 in Game 3, and 5-1 again in Game 4. The Phillies series, the Phillies pitched well against the Dodgers as well. The Blue Jays have good pitching. The difference in this series, if the Blue Jays want to win this series, is their offense has to be as good as it was against Seattle. They got to have big hits from Vlad. They got to have big hits from Springer. And I think that the Blue Jays can win this series, and I'm going to pick the Blue Jays in 7. They have home field advantage. You saw it the other night. That stadium is pure electric, and I think that the nation is in for a very fun series. And, and I don't buy into a lot of hogwash too. Well, if the Dodgers win this series, we're definitely going to have a lockout in 2027, which we can talk about off-season stuff later. I think ultimately, every sport has had a lockout. And is that a possibility? Probably so. We may miss a few games. But I don't think it's going to be a direct result of this series or the series against the Brewers or whatnot. The fact of the matter is, if the Dodgers win the series, this is the first repeat champion that we've had since the Yankees in the late 90s and early 2000s. So say what you want. Obviously the Red Sox have won 4 World Championships, but they were in a very different time frame, 04, 07, 13, 18. The Giants won theirs in 10, 12, and 14, but they weren't among the top in payroll. Those were different scenarios. Those were different things. So I think that's a different conversation we had to have. But I predict the Blue Jays in 7. I think they're going to pull it out. I think the home field advantage is bigger in this series than people are going to give it credit for. Now, the only difference is now if the Dodgers come out and they steal games 1 and 2, kind of like they did against the Brewers, then we may be looking at a different series, and we may be having a different conversation come next Tuesday. But I don't think it's going to go that way.
Yeah, I think that first of all, the whole freaking country, Canada, is going to be ready to rock and roll. I think that if they get Bo Bichette back, which from what I've heard is they will, I think that he's going to give them an energy boost. Listen, I'm going to tell you, my gut tells me Toronto. And it goes back to the old adage, like it's hard to repeat. And that's kind of where my head's at. I think they're going to get. Go ahead.
It's not only that, Austin. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I didn't throw this in here a while ago, but I think it's important for people to know is the Brewers didn't have success against the Dodgers because they can never get to the bullpen. Right. If the Blue Jays are able to get to the Dodger bullpen, it's going to be a different story. Now, granted, the Dodgers did have to use their bullpen in games 3 and 4. But the game had been dominated up to that point by Glasnow and Shohei Ohtani in games 3 and 4. Games 1 and 2, they didn't need the bullpen. You had Snell for 8, I think it was, and you had Yamamoto who pitched a complete game. Right. So you can't argue that in that series to this series. I truly believe if the Blue Jays are able to get to those starters early and get the bullpen early, even if it's 1-1 early, 2-1 early, Blue Jays would lead, or vice versa. If they're able to get those pitch counts up and able to get that bullpen later, I think the Blue Jays have the lineup to flip the script on the Dodgers.
Yeah, I do too. I think a hit. I'm a big momentum guy, right? I'm a big using things to carry you. I think that home run by George Springer, even though it wasn't a walk off, I think that's going to give them the juice to win this thing. To help give them the juice to win this thing. I like Toronto. I understand the Dodgers have everybody and their brother. I get that, but my gut is telling me Toronto wins this series, and I think they take the first two games. I think they take the first two games at home. I think they find a way to get one in LA, and I think they win this series in 6.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I really do. One other stat, and I know we're getting towards the end here, but they are the team with the most comeback wins in 2025 in Major League Baseball. We saw what they did in this past series of the Mariners. Hey, if you would have told me that the Blue Jays were going to win this series, that past series against the Mariners in 7, I would have told you after games 1 and 2, I would have told you were nuts.
Yeah.
But that's who they are. They come back, they keep fighting, and I think we're in for a heck of a series. It's going to be fun.
Completely agree. I absolutely agree. I want to wrap it up with one question for you. And I've given you all day to think about this. I told you last week I had a question, and then I didn't tell you what it was. But I give you all week or all day to think about this. And we're going to talk about it real quick. And we try to keep this show around an hour, so we've got 8 minutes to discuss this roughly. Who is the greatest sports dynasty of all time?
Well, this is where you're going to get into a lot of arguments. To me, the old definition of a dynasty is you have to win 3. And so therefore, unless you've won like back to back here, and then you've won another one later, and it's in like a 8 to 10 year time frame where you've won multiple, it has to be a three-peat for me. And so obviously the ultimate is the Chicago Bulls. They did it twice in an 8-year period. There's no topping that, in my opinion. You can argue whatever you want. You can argue Golden State 3 out of 4, this, that, and other, whatever. They didn't win 3 in a row. They didn't. Miami won back to back with LeBron. Well, LeBron and Bosh and Wade and those guys, but they didn't win 3 in a row. So, to me, without going back historically with every single sport, just from what I've seen in my lifetime, it's got to be the Bulls. I mean, you got the greatest player in the history of basketball and great team also with Scottie Pippen and those guys. But they did it twice. They did it twice in an 8-year period.
And probably win 8 in a row if Michael Jordan does not retire.
Yeah. I mean, Houston Rockets, Clyde Drexler and Elijah Warren, those guys can say what they want. They're not winning. Maybe they get one over Jordan somehow, some way. They're not winning. They're not beating those years. I've seen a lot of those videos here lately on TikTok floating around. No, it's probably it's 8 in a row if he doesn't retire and go to baseball.
Which isn't that so crazy to think about, man?
It's 8. I'm sorry, it's 8 in a row, and that's why Michael Jordan's the greatest of all time. And we can put stats to it as well if we need to, but that's another debate for another time. But that's why that's the greatest dynasty. 6 championships in 8 years, 2 different three-peats. And maybe my mom still has it somewhere, but I had the repeat 3-peat shirt when I was a kid, and There's probably some vintage ones floating around out there. But when in history can you ever remember seeing a T-shirt like that where a team had a repeat, three-peat?
Yeah.
That tells you all you need to know right there.
Yeah, you're right. I do think about the Patriots. I think about the Celtics and Bill Russell. That the 60s.
Yeah, you can definitely throw them in there. But
I think about UCLA in the 70s.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, if you go back historically, I mean, you can make arguments. UCLA, I mean, if you talk about the quantity and the overall of how many championships they won, what was it, 10 out of 11 years they won, or maybe it was 11 championships in 13 years or something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that.
I mean, you could definitely make that argument. My argument was based off what I've seen with my own eyes,
right,
and lived it. It has to be the Bulls.
Yeah, it's hard for me to, I'll be honest, to include college teams because those players are changing to an extent as to where with the Bulls, like, yeah, there were roster changes because there always is, but for the most part, it's the same guys. You're bringing the same dudes in every time. So my mind, I would probably go with the Bulls too. There are other teams I like. I was kind of a Warriors guy. I love Steph Curry, still do. But honestly, man, if they win that a ring that year that they go 73-9 in the regular season, I don't think it's a question. Like, then that would be 17, 18. That'd be 4 in a row. I mean, that'd be 4 straight. Yeah. But they didn't. So you kind of talking hypotheticals there. So yeah, I got to go with the Bulls too. I think Jordan's a GOAT. I mean, I know that's obviously a discussion that maybe we can have sometime on here. Maybe I absolutely believe that Jordan is the GOAT. Maybe I can hop on here and play devil's advocate or something for against you for LeBron. But yeah, I think it's Jordan. I think it's the Bulls, and they were just so unstoppable and so feared that and I didn't get to see that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I got to see that live. I've watched The Last Dance. Obviously, you know me, I'm a basketball guy. So I've watched games and stuff. I went back and watched games and all of that stuff. But I didn't get to see it live. So if that disqualifies me from saying that, then I guess I could pick somebody else. But I do agree with you. I think the Bulls, they were just so feared. Like, nobody wanted to play them. And I know there are guys now, whenever they can't get on the court and prove it, but like Isaiah Thomas, and all that, and all his idiocy that he likes to spread.
Yeah. But he's running a lot of credibility with a lot of people. But forgot where I was going with this, but I think they were feared. I will say this I don't think, if you look back at The Last Dance, and I remember them when they played a lot the Knicks, I don't think the Knicks were scared of them. They weren't good enough to beat them, but I don't think they were scared of them. And I, for dang sure, know that the Indiana Pacers and Reggie Miller were not scared of the Bulls. And I'll tell you, the nervous I've ever been watching one of my favorite teams in my childhood growing up was Game 7 against the Pacers in '98, when it looked like, they were going to win. Pacers were going to pull it off and win. I just heard you say that. I saw throw that out there. They weren't able to get it done, but I think the Knicks and the Pacers, I don't think they were scared at all. In fact, I think, one of those years the Knicks took the Bulls to 7 games, and those two teams in particular wanted every bit of it. They just weren't good enough to beat them.
Yep, I think the Knicks were very physical too. They were a physical team, and of course, before Rodman got there to Chicago, the Pistons. We're not afraid of them. But yeah, I got to go with the Bulls. We'll wrap it up with that, guys. We'll see you next week. I know Jordan and I are going to talk about a couple maybe special episodes that we can maybe roll out there, even if they're a little bit shorter. But if not, next week, regardless, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming. And the World Series will be underway. I don't think it'll be over. Even if it was to be a sweep, I don't think it'll be over.
Let's see. Games 1 and 2, Friday, Saturday, off day Sunday. If somebody were to sweep, game 4 would be
Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And then, we'll have college football. College basketball will be right around the corner at that point. It'll be a week. So we're going to have a ton to talk about again next week. So don't forget to like the video or like this podcast. Share it with your friends. Follow us on X, TikTok, Facebook, everywhere you like to social media. We are there. Instagram too. And yeah, man, it's been great to do this, and we'll see you next week.
See you.